Madrid, a gray morning. The streets of the old town seemed to remain immersed in slumber, except for the echo of Mónica Mous's hurried steps breaking the silence of the empty atmosphere. A single mother, her life was already difficult, but it had become even heavier after she accepted a job as a cleaner for a man of immense wealth. Yet her work wasn't limited to dusting. It involved healing invisible wounds, deep ones, hidden beneath the facade of a rich but profoundly lonely man. Dobby Malfoy, the man in question, lived in a majestic and isolated mansion in the heart of Madrid. The house, though luxurious, exuded a sense of coldness, as if it were a temporary refuge for a lost soul. That morning, the faint light filtering through the gray sky and the grand windows cast pale reflections on the gleaming marble walls, but failed to dispel the quiet stillness that enveloped everything. Dobby stood before a large mirror, an antique piece with a gilded metal frame. His pristine white shirt, adorned with delicate golden stitches, could not conceal the wounds he bore inside. Strange reddish marks had begun to appear on his skin, like scars from a battle he could not win. Small white pustules emerged from these marks, as if they were open wounds from a past that refused to heal. "Why?" Dobby whispered, his trembling hands adjusting the buttons of his shirt. "Why is this happening to me?" His gaze fixed on the mirror, his eyes dark as moonless nights, searching for an answer that never came. The marks on his body were unresolved questions, lingering traces of an unbearable solitude. Unable to bear his own reflection, but equally unable to look away, the mirror showed a man trapped forever within himself. A soft knock at the door broke the silence of the room. Mónica entered cautiously, like a stranger in a close friend's house. She looked at the man before her, not with fear, but with silent empathy, because she understood that Dobby's wounds were not easy to see, but were undoubtedly the most painful. Dobby did not look at her, merely commanding in a cold voice, "Heal these wounds, but remember, this is not in your contract." Mónica remained silent, not responding. She knew her task was not just to tend to physical wounds, but to soothe the pain Dobby carried deep within his heart. She approached him gently, her hand brushing against the scars, feeling the weight of the suffering they carried. Dobby stayed motionless, as if an invisible force kept him trapped in that moment. The scars on his body, though hidden beneath expensive clothing, could not mask the truth of his soul. Confusion, loneliness, and despair emanated from him, like open wounds that would never heal. Mónica looked into his eyes, seeing the deep fatigue reflected in them. "Who are you, Dobby Malfoy?" she asked softly but sharply. "Who are you really beneath all these layers?" Dobby raised his head, a painful longing evident in his gaze. "I am a broken man, Mónica. A man trying to be something more, something I will never be. But how can I find myself if I don't even recognize who I am?" Dobby's question hung in the air like a desperate plea. Mónica stood still, her hands continuing to move over his skin, unable to change anything. She knew her job was not to heal the wounds, but to help him face himself. A few minutes later, the sound of an engine broke the silence from outside. Mónica stood up, gave Dobby one last look, and left the room. She knew that Dobby Malfoy's story wasn't just that of a rich man with wounds on his body. It was the story of someone torn between what he wanted to show the world and who he truly was. As the teal Rolls-Royce Phantom left the mansion grounds, Dobby remained motionless inside, staring out the window as if searching for something he could not find. His question kept echoing in his mind, repeating over and over. How could he step out of the shadows when he himself was the source of his wounds? In the city of Seville, under an orange-tinted sky at dusk, Dobby Malfoy walked through the lonely yet elegant streets of his neighborhood, where shadows danced on ancient facades. Each of his steps was like a melancholic melody, resonating in the air like a wounded violin, finding echoes in the deserted corners of the city. His stride was firm, as if the very ground threatened to yield beneath his weight, but he, with his proud bearing, defied even the silence of the night, slipping through the cobblestone streets. He stopped in front of a majestic building, its entrance marked by golden reflections. He pressed the button of a dark wooden elevator which opened with a soft whisper, revealing a figure waiting on the other side. Mónica Mous, a woman of understated beauty, but with a genuine smile that lit up the coldness of the surroundings, met him with a gaze that contrasted with the harshness of the space. In a soft yet formal voice, she said, "Good evening, Mr. Malfoy."
"Penthouse?" Dobby asked, barely lifting his gaze.
She nodded without a word, and as she pressed the destination on the elevator panel, a heavy silence settled between them. As they ascended, Dobby's eyes fixed on the mirror adorning one of the elevator walls. His reflection stared back at him. A man admired by the world, tall, impeccably dressed, with an elegance that overshadowed even the light. Yet as his gaze wandered across his own image, something disturbed him. On his chest, the shadow of moisture began to emerge, timid at first, but growing with each passing second. The fabric of his shirt, concealed beneath his designer jacket, could not hide the stain that began to mar the perfection of his exterior. The pain he had tried to suppress now seeped to the surface. At that moment, Dobby made a crucial decision. He must find a haute couture designer skilled and discreet enough to cover the cracks in his soul with fine fabrics, so the world would never know the true extent of his scars. The elevator chimed softly, announcing their arrival at the penthouse. Dobby straightened his shoulders and adjusted his collar with determination, as though donning an invisible armor before facing a new day in his castle of illusions. A short while later, in his office, Dobby stood before the panoramic window overlooking the city with the imposing Giralda in the distance. In that space, he wrestled between his public image, the one everyone adored, and the insecurities that plagued him within. There, trapped between appearance and emptiness, his mind could not stop thinking about Constance, the woman who had captivated his heart for years. In his fantasy, she was the perfect woman, and he was the man who dreamed of sharing his life with her. But the fear of her discovering his flaws kept him away from his dream. The door burst open, interrupting his thoughts. Constance appeared, her tall and elegant figure standing out in the dim light. Her jasmine perfume filled the room before her words could break the silence. Dobby stood, his heart racing. She approached him, her black wool coat perfectly tailored to her form. Constance leaned in to kiss him on both cheeks, a gesture that always caused a restrained happiness in him. A fleeting moment when he could feel the warmth of her closeness. But this time, her gaze drifted to Dobby's chest. Her eyes stopped on the visible stain on his silk shirt, a treacherous trace of what he had tried to conceal. "How repulsive, Dobby!" Constance exclaimed, stepping back instantly. Her face twisted in an expression of disgust that pierced Dobby like a sharp dagger. The room, bathed moments before in the beauty of the evening, seemed to collapse. Dobby felt everything he had built crumble around him. Shame consumed him like a wave, and for the first time in years, he could not hide from the reality of his own humanity. "It's nothing, Constance," he said, his voice trembling as he tried to mask his anguish with a tense smile. "A small accident with a drawer. Please forget about it." Constance chuckled lightly, as though the thought of such a human mistake was something that could not fit into the perfection of her world.
"How horrifying, Dobby," she said, her laughter echoing in the air as if nothing could shatter the bubble of her happiness. "For a moment, I thought you had leprosy or something worse."
Dobby lowered his head, his forced smile barely concealing the painful disappointment he felt. Inside, a slow and heavy procession moved forward as he once again became lost in the labyrinth of his own mind. On a gray afternoon, where the sunlight wavered and faded like a distant dream, the old building in the center of Valencia resembled a crumbling castle, shrouded in the mist of human indifference. The echo of footsteps resonated in the marble halls, amplified by the absolute silence that enveloped the place, as if time itself had decided to take a pause. Dobby Malfoy, a man with an impassive expression, walked down the long corridor, observing how the evening shadows slid across the white walls, cloaking them in a disquieting gray. Each of his steps resounded like the strike of a hammer on steel, and his eyes, cold as ice, missed no detail. Yet something in the air that night felt off, unsettling him and stirring his mood. The clock on the wall struck the exact hour, its shadow stretching to the elevator, pausing briefly as he regarded it with disdain. With a firm gesture, Dobby pressed the elevator button, but at the precise moment the doors opened, something stopped him. The empty space inside, the absence of the elevator attendant, filled him with a profound unease, as if the entire universe had halted in its course. His jaw tightened, and a faint murmur of disapproval escaped his lips. "This is unacceptable," he thought, feeling his frustration morph into irritation. "I don't pay them to neglect their schedules. Incompetence has no place in my empire." Determined, Dobby pressed the button for the basement, where his luxury car awaited him. However, in an unexpected twist, his finger veered toward another floor, the General Services Department. His employees' lack of discipline infuriated him, and he felt compelled to address it personally. Upon reaching the end of the hallway, his gaze fixed on the closed door of the department. Fury consumed him, and each step toward it echoed like the rumble of thunder. When he finally arrived, he paused for a moment, taking a breath, as if the cold could calm his anger. He opened the door without hesitation. Inside, what he saw left him paralyzed. There she was, the elevator attendant, in a secluded corner of the room, her back turned to him, engrossed in something in her hands. Her slow, almost silent movements contrasted sharply with the tension of the moment. Dobby took another step, his frustration burning inside him, and in a swift impulse advanced toward her, his voice booming like thunder.
"What on earth are you doing here? Your place is in the elevator!"
The woman turned slowly, startled by his intrusion. Her face, unremarkable in beauty, lit up with timid surprise. But what caught Dobby's attention most was what she held in her hands, a piece of uniform, being sewn with astonishing skill. The blue fabric, wrinkled from use, seemed insignificant, but the perfectly aligned stitches transformed it into a work of art. Dobby stared, incredulous, as his thoughts tangled with the scene before him. "What are you doing with this?" he asked, his tone shifting unknowingly, as if the perfect stitching had captivated him. The woman, nervous, tried to explain, but her words failed to dispel Dobby's confusion. Ignoring her, he continued to observe the work with an almost obsessive focus.
"Where did you learn to do this?" he finally asked, his voice softer, contrasting with his usual severity.
The woman, embarrassed, handed over the piece of uniform with trembling hands, her face growing redder with surprise. Dobby, with a curiosity he had not shown before, brought the fabric closer to his eyes. "My mother taught me when I was young," she replied with a faint smile, memories enveloping her. "She mended clothes in the neighborhood. We had no money, so she did it by hand. Over the years, she saved enough to buy a modest sewing machine, but when she fell ill, I had to sell it to pay for her treatment. It wasn't enough. She passed away, but she left me with everything she knew." Dobby, examining the piece of uniform, understood, though he did not show it. In that moment, the arrogance that defined him faded for an instant, as the story of this humble woman touched something within him, something that, for the first time, made him realize that value is not always found in what one has, but in what one does with what one has. The night in Valencia hung heavy and enigmatic, the air filled with murmurs of ancient secrets whispered between the walls of the mansions that adorned the city. The cobblestones shimmered softly under the yellowish glow of the street lamps, and the shadows stretched like faceless specters. In front of a mansion exuding luxury and mystery, Dobby Malfoy gazed at the garment in his hands, his fingers brushing it slowly, almost as if the fabric could reveal a forgotten secret. The atmosphere grew thick with a heavy silence until Dobby's deep voice broke the stillness of the night, resonating against the very walls of the mansion. "What's your name?" he asked, his tone direct and slightly distant, like a command. Mónica Mous, the young woman standing before him, hesitated for a moment. Her eyes glimmered with the unease of someone caught between timidity and fear. With a slight bow of her head, she murmured, almost in a whisper, "Mónica Mous, sir." Dobby observed her intently, his expression impenetrable, and then, with a gesture that seemed to mark the end of something, declared firmly, "Mónica Mous, you are dismissed as an elevator operator." The words fell like heavy hammers, and Mónica, unable to contain herself, felt tears begin to stream down her face. With trembling hands, she tried to hide her pain, but before she could utter a word, Dobby continued, his tone as sharp as a blade. "Gather your belongings. Come with me to my mansion. I'm offering you a new job contract." Mónica, still shocked and almost sobbing, looked up briefly, and through her tears murmured, "Thank you very much, sir. What should I do?" Dobby's response was almost a cutting whisper, interrupting any attempt at an explanation with a stern gesture. "You have 30 seconds to collect your things. Don't ask questions." The silence that followed was so thick it seemed to devour everything around them as he turned on his heels and walked toward the door. Monica, paralyzed by the swiftness of events, gathered her strength and began to move, though each step seemed to waver between disbelief and the need to understand. That very night, a green emerald Rolls-Royce Phantom, gleaming under the moonlight, stopped in front of Dobby Malfoy's majestic mansion. The sound of the wheels on the asphalt faded into the night air as Jiri, the chauffeur, dressed impeccably in black, opened the rear door of the luxurious vehicle. Monica stepped out, almost trembling, alongside the enigmatic millionaire, Dobby. Her eyes lifted to take in the mansion, a structure that seemed to defy time itself. "Monica," he said in a low voice, "this will be your new home as long as you comply with the first clause of the contract."
"What clause, sir?" she asked, confused.
"Absolute discretion," he replied seriously. Monica, still not fully understanding, nodded with a mix of fear and acceptance. By 9 o'clock that night, Monica was settled in one of the mansion's rooms when a maid handed her a message. She was to go down to Dobby's office. Her heart pounded as she descended the stairs, her simple dress clashing with the opulence surrounding her. The contrast was disconcerting, but her steps were steady, though marked by uncertainty. Upon reaching the office, she knocked softly, and Dobby's deep voice resonated from inside. "Come in, Monica." When she entered, she saw him there, his back turned, wearing a white silk shirt that reflected a faint light. As he turned to face her, his gaze, cold and distant, betrayed no trace of emotion, but his presence was as overwhelming as a storm before the thunder. "Here I am, sir, as you ordered. What should I do?" she said. Silent, Dobby began unbuttoning his shirt one button at a time, slowly and deliberately. Monica, uncomfortable, couldn't help but frown, her face showing an unease she couldn't hide. When he continued, she interrupted him, almost in a desperate shout.
"What are you doing, sir? I didn't come here for this."
Dobby looked at her harshly, his face tense, his eyes reflecting cold indifference. "Do you think I like you?" he asked, his voice laden with disdain. "Do you think I'd propose something indecent? Don't flatter yourself, that's not why you're here." Monica, trembling, stood frozen. Her face paled, and her breathing grew labored. She couldn't comprehend what was happening. "But you're undressing in front of me," she stammered, her voice breaking with fear. Dobby ignored her. He continued unbuttoning his shirt, slow and meticulous, until he finally let it fall to the floor with a soft rustle. What appeared before Monica was not the elegant, confident man she had imagined, but a completely vulnerable figure covered in scars and pustules. A strange, penetrating odor began to fill the air, enveloping the room in an uncomfortable atmosphere. "Do you see it?" he said in a weak voice. "I suffer from a disease, and I need you to be my personal designer." Monica, trembling with fear and disgust, didn't know how to react to this image that defied everything she had known until then. She was no longer in the presence of a millionaire, but of a broken man, a human being full of hidden fears and suffering. In a secluded corner of the world, where the breeze whispered through the trees and the colors of the sunset spilled over like a canvas, an unexpected story of transformation began. The sun timidly filtered through the curtains, as if unwilling to disturb the delicate moment unfolding within the mansion. There, beneath a glass ceiling that revealed the clear afternoon sky, the air carried an unusual sense of stillness, as though time itself had paused to listen to a conversation between the invisible and the tangible. Dobby Malfoy, a man whose life had been marked by wealth and ostentation, sat hunched over in his own suffering. The skin on his body, worn down by years of excess and indulgence, resembled a forsaken map, filled with sores and scars that told tales of pain and disdain. He had believed himself immune to human fragility, trapped in his own world of appearances, but today the truth revealed itself in an unexpected way. Mónica Mous, a humble seamstress with a soul as simple as it was profound, approached with her usual calm. Her eyes shone with a tenderness that Dobby couldn't ignore. Without a hint of disgust, the woman began measuring his body with a tape measure that fell over the marks on his skin as if they were imprints of the past. "You don't need to touch something so repulsive," Dobby said disdainfully, trying to reject the gentleness of her touch. But Monica didn't stop. Her face, impassive and serene, betrayed none of the revulsion others might have felt at such a sight. "My mother suffered from bed sores," she began, breaking the silence in a way that unsettled the man. "I cared for her until her last breath. There's beauty in skin that speaks, that cries out for a love more perfect than mere appearances." Her words, soft as a melody, pierced Dobby's heart, and he couldn't help but tremble. As his eyes wandered over the scars on his body, the discomfort inside him grew, yet Monica's presence kept him tethered to a truth he preferred to ignore. Monica continued her work, sliding the tape measure with tranquil precision. Each measurement felt like a revelation, and the man, unable to look away from his ravaged skin, grew increasingly vulnerable under the attention of a woman who didn't see what he saw but something deeper. At that moment, Monica, without losing her composure, uttered a phrase that resonated in the air with a wisdom Dobby had never encountered. True repulsion doesn't lie in what the eyes see, but in what the soul refuses to accept. Her words fell on him like gentle rain, washing away the weight of shame and leaving only a reflection on the fragility of humanity. That night, as the sun set in a crimson glow over the mansion's gardens, Dobby retired to his room, consumed by thoughts he had never entertained. His steps were slower, his heart heavier, and in his mind the image of Mónica Mous, a woman whose beauty lay in her humanity and compassion, remained with him like a beacon of light in the darkness of his soul. The next day, the mansion seemed to breathe with a renewed calm. Threads, fabrics, and needles awaited their transformation into more than just clothing. Monica, at her work table, surrounded by silk and linen, seemed to weave more than a dress. She was weaving the possibility of redemption, not only for Dobby but for herself. "Every mark on the skin tells a story," she thought as she delicately touched the fabric, her hands moving with a grace known only to those who truly understand the value of scars. The afternoon passed, and with it, the realization that human fragility is not a weakness, but a testament to what we are capable of overcoming. In the stillness of the night, under a sky as dark as ink, Dobby Malfoy stepped out of his car with an elegance almost devoid of life, a solitary figure walking along the cobblestones of the deserted street. The mansion loomed before him, cold and distant like an enchanted palace, its gray stone facade resonating with echoes of the past. Jiri, his chauffeur, opened the door without a word, as if every gesture had been preordained by the relentless routine they both shared. The cool night air brushed his face, but Dobby felt nothing of its presence. The weariness of a heavy day at the consortium, where decisions were laden with discomfort and the weight of doubt, dragged him into an unending darkness. There were no words that could soothe his soul, no gestures that could dispel the shadows that had accumulated in his heart. He thought of Constance, the woman who seemed as distant, as unattainable, as a reflection on turbulent waters. Every moment, without confessing his love, plunged him further into silent agony, like a shipwreck in his own thoughts. The mansion felt emptier than ever, and the echo of his footsteps reverberated through the rooms, each one emptier than the last. He climbed the stairs with light steps, yet burdened by heavy thoughts, not stopping to greet anyone, knowing that Mónica Mous, the seamstress no one paid attention to, would be lost in her work in the atelier. However, apathy overtook him, and he couldn't care less. Upon reaching his room, he pushed the door open with a force that let out a dry creak, and what he found inside stopped him in his tracks. The air was thick with a strange incense, one he had never encountered before, with a hint of copaiba that seemed to blend with the shadows of the room. The atmosphere was so heavy with unseen presences that Dobby had to take a deep breath to avoid being overwhelmed. Every corner of the room seemed to be watching, observing, waiting for something from him. With each step he took, the atmosphere drew him in further, wrapping him in a trance that felt more like a spell than relief. On the bed, 3 shirts, perfectly folded, lay like pieces of an impossible puzzle. The fabrics, of an almost ethereal softness, glimmered in the dim light, as if imbued with a life of their own. Each seemed to whisper a story, a secret known only to Mónica Mous. Next to the shirts was a note, impeccably folded, as if awaiting him. Upon reading it, The words struck his heart like thunder on a moonless night. Mr. Malfoy, I have prepared a bath with oils and flowers, like the ones my mother used to calm her soul. I implore you to immerse yourself in it, allowing the water to soothe your thoughts and purify your spirit. Then, I ask you to wear each garment I have created, designed to embrace your body and make you feel that every scar is merely a sign of your humanity. Do not fear the pain, let the fabric caress you, and let each touch speak of the love and dedication I have poured into them. Every scar tells a story, and each of these fabrics tells yours. Respectfully, Mónica Mous. Dobby stood motionless, the letter in his hand, his eyes fixed on the words that seemed to shake him to his core. How had Mónica Mous, a mere elevator attendant until recently, managed to understand so deeply the abyss he lived in? He could not stop thinking about the delicacy with which she had designed each shirt, as if every thread was a promise of something greater, something deeper than any desire or power he held. He fell to his knees, unable to contain the tears that streamed from his eyes, each carrying a weight he didn't know how to bear. That night, Dobby descended to the mansion's dining room, wearing one of the shirts Mónica had created for him, brushing against his skin with a softness that surprised him. He sat at the table, alone, but for the first time in a long while, solitude seemed to leave its mark. The oil bath had soothed his body, but his soul remained restless, searching for answers in a place where questions never ceased to arise. Before taking his first bite, the sound of footsteps interrupted his thoughts. A maid, visibly nervous, approached the dining room.
Sir, I'm sorry to disturb you, but Miss Constance has just arrived and is in the main hall.
Dobby felt his heart stop, his throat dry as though the very air had frozen. His body tensed, and in an instant the dining room that had been his sanctuary of solitude transformed into a stage of palpable tension.
Bring her in, immediately!
He ordered, his voice barely audible, his heart pounding in his chest. The maid quickly nodded and disappeared down the hallway. The hall filled with Constance's presence, an almost unreal vision. Her perfume, a blend of jasmine and bergamot, intoxicated the air. Dobby, unable to help himself, let out an admiring smile.
Tonight, Constance, you are more radiant than ever, he said, his voice trembling with restrained emotion as his soul wavered between desire and fear.
In a secluded corner of an elegant Madrid salon, adorned with heavy curtains that softened the glow of candlelight, Dobby Malfoy watched Mónica Mous with a mix of fascination and caution. Shadows danced across her face, accentuating the perfection of her features, and he, as if a spectator in a dream, could not look away. "What woman could find even a single flaw in you?" Mónica said, her voice soft, yet infused with a curiosity only she could convey. Dobby stood immediately, his gestures reflecting the kind of courtesy that seemed to exist solely in her presence. He leaned slightly and, as always, offered the customary double kiss. But for him, those gestures were like the prelude to a life forever out of reach, a life that faded every time his eyes met hers. They sat, and Monica's attention drifted to the immaculate shirt Dobby was wearing. The candlelight reflected off the fabric, giving it a subtle sheen. "Is it from Augusto de Pierre?" she asked with a sophisticated air, tracing her index finger through the air as though marking the garment with a delicate yet meaningful gesture. Dobby, maintaining his composure, responded casually, though inwardly he was grateful for every thread of the shirt that made him appear worthy of her gaze. "It's from a new designer I'm trying out," he said, knowing his words concealed more than they revealed. Mónica, intrigued, narrowed her eyes and leaned slightly closer to him. "Doesn't he design women's clothing?" she asked, her voice carrying a coquettish tone that made the air between them grow heavier. Dobby smiled, though inside, he felt as if the words he was about to speak might seal his fate. "In his hands, I must seem a goddess," he replied, with a smile that hid both admiration and a tension that vibrated in the air. Jiri, who had been silently observing from a corner, locked eyes with Mónica. She smiled faintly, and, unable to help himself, Jiri found himself ensnared by the spell of those eyes. "You already are," he murmured, unthinking, his voice sincere and deep, as if the very air of the room had stilled. A silence settled between them, dense and palpable. Mónica blinked, and for a moment her usual indifference cracked. It was then she understood what Dobby dared not say. The man before her, with his flawless face and air of mystery, was hopelessly in love with her. In the heart of Madrid, where the murmurs of the city seemed to fade as the night claimed the world, Mónica settled into her chair with the grace of a queen. The dinner continued, marked by soft laughter, fleeting glances, and words that hovered between flirtation and admiration. Dobby couldn't stop looking at her. She wasn't just another woman. She was the dream he had harbored in his heart for years. The evening reached its peak when Mónica, delicately holding a glass of wine between her fingers, lifted her gaze to him. Her expression shifted effortlessly from mischief to determination, a transformation that left him bewildered. "You know, Dobby," she said, her voice soft yet resolute, "I find you truly attractive." She paused, as if each word carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken thoughts. "I'm going to be direct with you. That shirt, it makes me imagine what's beneath it, and I must confess that my curiosity to discover it is irresistible." The evening grew even more intense under the candlelight, and the atmosphere thickened as if time had stopped just for the two of them. Monica's words struck Dobby like lightning on a moonless night. His mind clouded, caught between disbelief and the desire that her words unleashed within him. He had never imagined that the most desired woman in the room would offer him something so daring. "I don't know what to say," he stammered, his voice betraying the nervousness coursing through him. "I can't believe that—" Mónica let out a soft, natural laugh as though she had anticipated his reaction. Her eyes locked onto his, unyielding, not allowing him to escape the storm of emotions she had unleashed. "Yes, Dobby," she said, her voice laden with a dangerous magnetism. "Exactly that. Let's see how this night ends." And at that moment Dobby felt the air in the dining room transform, as if everything around him had ceased to exist. The woman he had idealized for so long was offering him the impossible. In the dark mansion, barely illuminated by the soft glow of a solitary lamp, Dobby Malfoy watched with a pounding heart as the figure glided down the hallway. It was Constance, the sublime lady whose presence had captivated him from their very first meeting. With a mix of adoration and awe, Dobby dared to speak, though the words caught in his throat. "Believe me, Constance, I don't know if you're real or a mirage of overwhelming beauty that consumes me," he said, his voice breaking. A sigh escaped his lips as he gazed at her, yearning for more than just to watch her glide by, like a whisper of pure and fleeting beauty. She smiled, a gesture full of mystery, and with steady steps, she moved toward the room he had indicated. Dobby watched her until she disappeared behind the staircase, his heart pounding as if that moment had etched itself into his soul. A moment of silence enveloped him before his mind returned to the storm of thoughts. He rose cautiously, but instead of heading to his office, where several papers awaited his signature, he found himself walking down the corridor toward the atelier. A strange knot formed in his stomach, and a sense of despair overwhelmed him. There, in front of the door to the room where Mónica Mous rested, Dobby stopped in his tracks. With urgency, he knocked on the door with his knuckles. "Mónica, open up! I need your help," he shouted, his tone betraying more than anxiety. The door creaked open, revealing the sleepy face of the seamstress. Her eyes reflected surprise, mixed with a hint of alarm. "Mr. Malfoy?" she asked, opening the door a bit wider. "Are you in pain, or has something gone wrong with the fabric?" "Follow me," Dobby replied without waiting for an explanation, his voice laden with desperation. "This is a matter of life and death." Mónica, her hair tousled, grabbed a shawl resting near the door and followed him without question. Dobby's fear grew as they advanced through the hallway, his footsteps echoing through the mansion like an urgent call to the unknown. Upon reaching the atelier, Dobby quickly shut the door, ensuring they were completely alone. The workshop, shrouded in shadows, seemed like a sanctuary of frozen ideas, suspended in time by the stillness of its walls. The shadows of fabrics in the display case took on strange shapes under the dim light of the lamp. Dobby approached Mónica, his hands trembling, his face transformed by palpable anxiety. "Mónica, I need you to help me hide something," he murmured. "I have an engagement, and I can't allow my wounds to be seen. Do something, anything to conceal them."
Monica observed him silently, her deep eyes looking beyond his words. Then, with a calmness that contrasted with Dobby's urgency, she responded, "Mr. Malfoy, before trying to hide something, we must understand it well. Scars are not imperfections. They are stories of what we've lived. They are maps of courage. Have you ever seen an eagle hide its broken wings after a storm? Scars don't make someone less. They make them stronger."
Dobby swallowed hard. Her words seemed to reach beyond the physical, awakening something that had lain dormant for years. Monica continued, her gaze fixed and challenging. "Do you want me to hide what is real? Or would you rather someone look at you and see a man who has fought and still stands, despite his scars?" A heavy silence stretched between them. Dobby, battling the pride that had always accompanied him, felt his facade begin to crumble. Despite the truth resonating in her words, his fear prevailed.
"Enough with the words, Monica. Do as I say," he ordered harshly, as if trying to shield himself behind the mask of his authority.
Monica said nothing more. With swift and precise movements, she headed to the kitchen to gather what she needed to prepare a mixture that could conceal Dobby's scars. The lamp's dim light glinted faintly on his injured skin, but he remained tense, as if that mask could protect him from the truth that was already beginning to erode his pride. The morning was calm in the city of Madrid, but inside that small workshop, the air vibrated with a profound stillness. Mónica Mous, without the slightest hint of discomfort, knelt beside Dobby Malfoy with a serenity that unsettled the man. With soft and steady hands, she began cleaning his wounds, using a cloth dampened in warm water. The gentleness of her movements seemed to disarm Dobby, who, feeling the touch of her hands, closed his eyes. In his mind, thoughts floated, too timid to be spoken aloud. "The touch of her hands is like a balm for my soul. She is not beautiful on the outside, but her beauty, so subtle, is the kind that touches the soul, and not just the skin," he thought. Monica delicately applied warm honey and oil to the sores, as if dropping a single raindrop onto a golden leaf. Her movements were slow, ceremonial, as she softly murmured, "The skin carries not only the scars of the body, but also those of the soul. This relief is for both, for you and for me." The workshop fell into complete silence, interrupted only by the calm breathing of Dobby, who began to feel a strange peace, as though those hands were restoring something he had lost long ago. Suddenly, the door to the atelier creaked open, breaking the atmosphere of concentration. A small figure peeked in timidly, with wide, curious eyes scanning the interior. It was a girl of about 10 years, wearing a simple dress with her dark hair tied into 2 braids.
"Mama, are you done yet?" she asked softly, her voice full of innocence.
Monica, who had remained composed until that moment, instantly turned pale. She dropped the cloth and quickly stood up, moving toward the door.
"Constance!" she exclaimed, mixing surprise and alarm. "What are you doing here? Didn't I tell you not to leave the room?"
The girl lowered her gaze, biting her lips, aware of her mistake. Dobby, who had been observing the scene with growing discomfort, frowned and straightened up in his chair. His gaze shifted between the girl and Monica, filled with questions. "Can you explain to me what your daughter is doing here and how you brought her without my knowledge?" he asked firmly, his voice resonating in the workshop. Monica took a deep breath, gathering the courage to face his reproach. She lowered her head and took Constance's hand, seeking comfort in her small figure before responding. "I met her when our mother passed away. That's why she calls me Mom. I know I should have asked for your permission to bring her, but I thought I was just going to say goodbye, and—" she began to say, her voice trembling under the weight of the situation. Dobby frowned even deeper, his face hardening with every word from Monica. The tension in the room became palpable, and the air in the atelier grew dense. "I don't like lies, Monica. You should have—" He started to reproach severely, but before he could finish, Constance, with a childlike bravery that broke through all barriers, approached Dobby, looking up at him with large, bright eyes. "What's wrong with your body, sir? Can I help you too, like my mom does? Monica is very kind. Don't scold her because of me." Dobby remained motionless, the words stuck in his throat. The purity of the child disarmed his anger, and an almost imperceptible smile escaped his lips. He sighed, strangely relieved, and allowed himself a moment of vulnerability.
"Fine," he murmured, finally relenting. "This will make it faster. I need to save time."
Constance smiled, happy to help, and turned to Monica, who looked at her with a mixture of surprise and relief. Both continued their task, the atmosphere shifting entirely. For the first time in a long while, the man allowed a moment of genuine connection to bloom before him. External beauty, he thought, was like a flower that withers at the first cold wind. But inner beauty was the trunk that remains, even when the petals fall into oblivion. With a tone that mixed impatience and authority, Dobby ordered, "Now cover these marks. They're clean." Monica nodded calmly, turning to Constance, who watched the scene with attention and a touch of concern.
"Constance, quickly go to the room and bring my makeup bag. Do it quietly without making any noise," she instructed gently.
Without a word, Constance ran silently, her small footsteps echoing faintly down the hallway. Dobby, still seated, watched as Monica organized the small workshop space, preparing for what was next. The wait felt endless, though only a few minutes passed. When Constance returned, her face reflected a mix of pride and satisfaction.
"I brought everything, Mama,"
she exclaimed as she handed over the bag. Monica took it gently and opened it, pulling out foundations, concealers, and brushes, ready to continue working on Dobby's wounds. The silence in the workshop enveloped them all once more, carrying a strange peace that seemed to settle in the air. On a rainy afternoon, in the secluded confines of the Malfoy mansion, the sound of brushes and sponges filled the air, interwoven with the soft murmur of voices working in silence. In the luminous atelier, Dobby Malfoy, a man whose existence was woven with secrets and fears, observed as Mónica Mous skillfully applied a liquid layer to his face, while Jiri, following his orders, gently blended the edges with a sponge. The work was meticulous, each movement executed with precision, as though every brushstroke was another layer shrouding a hidden truth Dobby feared to reveal.
The two worked in perfect harmony, wordlessly, as if sharing a common destiny, while the silence of the atelier was interrupted only by the faint rustling of tools against skin and Dobby's measured breathing. Yet, in his mind, chaos erupted as he wondered how someone as humble as Monica could possess such skill and patience. At the same time, an inexplicable sense of solace emanated from her touch.
It was then that the sound of approaching footsteps disrupted his thoughts. The door to the atelier creaked softly, and a feminine voice resonated, firm and melodious, with an authority Dobby could not ignore.
"Dobby, are you there?"
Constance's voice filled the air with unsettling clarity.
Dobby's face instantly paled, his expression draining of color as though fear itself had overtaken him. In a flash, he raised a hand and gestured for Monica and Jiri to quickly hide in the atelier's bathroom.
"Quick,"
he whispered, his voice trembling.
"Hide everything and don't come out until I'm gone."
Without hesitation, Monica grabbed Jiri's hand, and together they hurried into the small bathroom, carefully closing the door, while Dobby struggled to regain his composure. His breathing deepened, and with a forced smile, he quickly replied,
"Yes, Constance, I'm here. Come in."
The door opened gently, revealing the slender figure of Constance, who entered the atelier like an elegant shadow, her fitted black dress highlighting her majestic bearing. Despite her graceful presence, a palpable tension filled the air. "I got tired of waiting in your room," she said, her tone playful, but tinged with reproach. "I went looking for you around the mansion without success. Then I thought I saw the silhouette of a girl entering here, so I decided to follow her." Dobby, feeling cold sweat run down his back, tried to mask his growing anxiety. "A girl here?" he repeated, forcing a smile as he crossed his arms in an attempt to appear confident. "Impossible! No one on my staff has children here. You know how particular I am." Constance observed him with a piercing gaze, smiling smugly.
"That's true," she said. "But I like that you're particular because it means you know how to choose the best, like me."
With unwavering confidence, she approached him slowly, her gaze fixed on his face, while Dobby desperately tried to conceal the secret looming over him like a dark cloud. The tension in the air grew. Constance's eyes sparkled with an intriguing light as her delicate but firm hands rested on Dobby's chest. "I can't wait," she said, her voice soft yet commanding. "That new shirt looks so good on you. Come on, show me your torso." Dobby felt the weight of the situation crush him, as if the ground beneath his feet were crumbling. His mind raced for a way out, an excuse, anything to avoid what seemed inevitable. "Let's go to my room," he managed to murmur, his throat dry. Constance narrowed her eyes, amused by his nervousness. With an enigmatic smile, she replied, not yielding an inch. "What's the rush, Dobby?" Before he could react, Constance's hands moved swiftly, unbuttoning his shirt with a deftness that left him paralyzed. "Constance, wait!" he stammered, extending his hands in a clumsy attempt to stop her. But she didn't stop. In the blink of an eye, the silk shirt slipped off his shoulders, revealing Dobby's torso. He stood there, motionless, like a statue trapped in his vulnerability. His mind screamed, fear consuming him entirely. Would the makeup be enough? Would she discover it? Constance paused for a moment, her eyes scanning every inch of his skin. Her face revealed no clear emotion. Her expression was an enigma that made Dobby's heart race wildly. The silence stretched while he dared not breathe, awaiting the verdict she was about to deliver. The beautiful woman leaned closer to him, her eyes glinting under the dim light of the atelier, while Dobby remained ensnared by her gaze. On a gray and rainy afternoon in Madrid, where the whisper of the wind seeped through the cracks in the windows, Dobby Malfoy contemplated the scene before him. The light in the room was dim, almost insubstantial, yet it still managed to reveal a surface so perfect that his reflection seemed like a stranger, as if it were a specter trapped in a life not his own. A fleeting sigh escaped his lips, and his body relaxed for a moment. The makeup that had covered his skin was now slowly fading, fulfilling its purpose of concealing his deepest pain. But the relief he felt soon transformed into a sense of unease he couldn't shake. Mónica Mous, with her imposing yet serene presence, approached Dobby slowly. Her hands, delicate and soft, began to caress his chest, moving gently as if searching for something within him. Yet Dobby couldn't help but feel that something was off. Despite the perfection of her touch, his skin shivered, and an unsettling thought crept into his mind. Why do they feel so cold? He wondered, as his gaze drifted into an intangible void. Monica's hands, though soft and warm to the touch, lacked something essential, an unrecognized tenderness that he now realized was indispensable. The softness of her fingers felt hollow, as if everything they touched dissolved into a cold mist, leaving no trace of emotion. A strange emptiness took hold of him. Why doesn't she convey sweetness or love? He asked himself, disturbed by the coldness of a gesture that should have been comforting. As she continued, his mind wandered to another, even more disconcerting thought. Why do I think of her when the most beautiful woman in the world is the one caressing me? Images of Pia, her rough yet warm face, flooded his mind, filling his chest with a sensation that neither Monica's intoxicating fragrance nor her perfect presence could replace. Inside, Dobby wrestled with a whirlwind of emotions he was only beginning to comprehend. "Enough, Mónica," Dobby exclaimed, his voice resonating with an intensity that made her step back. Mónica, confused, retreated a step, her eyes searching Dobby's face for answers. But all she found was a mix of determination and an inexplicable sadness. "What does this mean, Dobby?" she asked, her tone a blend of curiosity and discomfort. Dobby took a deep breath, as if every word he was about to say cost him a piece of his soul. "Finally," he said, "not all that glitters is gold. The eye deceives, and the heart corrupts." "Don't judge a book by its cover." Mónica raised an eyebrow, utterly perplexed. "What are you trying to say?" she insisted, losing some of the confidence that usually defined her. Dobby didn't respond immediately. He walked swiftly to the workshop's light switch and with a firm movement turned on all the lamps. The room was flooded with a blinding glow, revealing every corner and every shadow. Without giving her time to react, Dobby grabbed a damp sponge left on the table. In one quick motion, he wiped it across his chest, erasing the makeup that had hidden his pain. In seconds, the scars, blemishes, and imperfections of his skin were exposed under the relentless light. Mónica stepped back, horrified. Her face contorted into an expression of disgust, and a choked scream escaped her throat. "What is that, Dobby?" she said, her voice filled with revulsion. "It's repulsive. Where's the bathroom? I need to vomit. I need to scrub my hands." Without waiting for a response, Mónica turned on her heels and walked toward the door, desperate to escape what she had just witnessed. She flung the door open with fury and froze in place upon seeing Pia and Constance hiding inside the bathroom. Their faces reflected the confusion and fear of being caught. Monica, completely unhinged, pointed at them furiously and screamed, "Would you care to explain who these beggars are?" Dobby, taking a deep breath, responded with a calmness that contrasted with the storm within him.
Pia and Constance are far more beautiful than you, Monica, in all your splendor. Pia is the designer of this shirt you so admired, but her true masterpiece is not in the fabric. It's in how she wove hope into my soul with her kindness. You, Monica, have shown that your beauty is a mask that disintegrates at the first truth you cannot comprehend. Pia and Constance, in their humility, are reflections of the eternal, of the essence that neither time nor affliction can wither. Their beauty doesn't need validation. The light of dawn filtered through the large windows of the workshop, bathing everything in a soft clarity that seemed to make the shadows disappear. At the center of this place, whose splendor was reflected on walls adorned with art and luxury, Dobby Malfoy rose with serene elegance and extended his hand toward Mónica Mous and Constanza, his gesture imbued with a gravity that seemed to pierce the very depths of the soul. "Leave this place," he said with a firm voice, yet carrying a softness like the murmur of wind through the trees. The weight of his words resonated in every corner like a forgotten melody. "This is not your place to hide, just as my truth can no longer remain concealed." Monica, her face marked by uncertainty, took Constanza's hand, who looked at her with a mixture of bravery and distrust. Slowly, almost as if time had stopped, they both left the small room. The contrast between their humble clothing and the magnificence of the atelier was palpable, yet a dignity shone on their faces that no expensive fabric could replicate. From the corner, Jiri's presence became evident. Her laughter, bitter and cynical, cut through the air.
Are you telling me that these two,
She gestured toward Monica and Constanza,
are now part of your life? Have you lost your mind, Dobby?
With unshakable calm, Dobby turned to her, his eyes filled with a determination capable of breaking mountains. "I have lost something, yes," he said, his voice lower but deeper, like a secret shared only with the moon. "I lost fear, the fear of being who I am. I lost the obsession of seeking approval in the empty eyes of those who see no further than the surface. You, Jiri, are the mirror that showed me my own falsehood, and for that, I thank you. Now I see clearly." Jiri stepped back, her face briefly breaking before hardening again. Dobby continued, his gaze firm, almost superhuman. "I ask you to leave my life, my world, my consortium. I'd rather surround myself with light, even if that means exposing the scars I bear, than remain in the darkness you represent." Jiri, her face twisted with rage and disgust, turned and staggered out of the mansion, while Dobby, Constanza, and Monica embraced tightly, as if the weight of the world had vanished in their union. Tears sparkled in their eyes, mingling with regret, gratitude, and pure love. Dobby broke the silence, his voice trembling with emotion. Forgive me for hiding you, for treating you as though you were less than the light you brought into my life. You didn't deserve that." Monica, deeply moved, stroked Constanza's head, who gazed at her with infinite tenderness. "It's okay, Dobby. What matters is that we're here," she responded softly.
Dobby shook his head, smiling despite his tears.
"Don't call me that," he said, taking her hands with a delicacy found only in the deepest moments of the soul. "And especially not if you agree to marry me." Constanza, with her inexhaustible sweetness, tightened her arms around them and exclaimed with joy, "Say yes, Mama. I want to heal his wounds every day. I don't feel disgusted." Monica, unable to contain her emotion, nodded slowly, her words escaping her heart as a whisper filled with love.
"I will love you until the end of my life, Dobby." The three embraced again, as one soul, while silence enveloped them in an ending that, in truth, was not an ending, but the beginning of something eternal. In this embrace, they understood that true triumph is not in hiding scars, but in embracing them with courage, for within them lies the essence of the purest beauty. Only by fully accepting ourselves can we find the love that heals and the peace that uplifts.
Thus, dear listeners, every time you comment, share, and like this story, you help feed an abandoned dog on the street. Leave your name so we can send you a hug and a personalized greeting. And now, don't miss out on this story.